Well, stock up on the noisemakers, silly hats, and Xanax. The 2020 election is only 838 days away. A new poll shows that 3 out of 4 Democrats believe it's time for a fresh face. Can you blame them? Check out their ghosts of candidates past. Biden, Hillary, Bernie, a cross between the Three Stooges and Cocoon. The only way to get out that vote is to deliver walkers door to door while yelling fire. Biden, he thinks Amtrak is a success. It loses $1 billion a year. Hillary, everyone loves a rematch, but everyone also loves a winner. The only thing she's won is ridicule. It's less a rematch and more a remake of Bride of Chucky. And Bernie, a relic pushing another relic called socialism. He's likable, but his beliefs are toxic. He's like those delicious berries you pick that poison your whole tribe. And we can't forget Liz, can we? But as someone who is 2% Native American, I have reservations. I do. I could say that. I'm Native American. Part of me. Not sure what part, though. So Dems want somebody new, somebody different. Where could they have learned this?
Anthony Weiner. Did you know that? She's married to Anthony Weiner. You know, the little bing, 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 bum, bum. I love you very much.
Yeah, from the guy they hate so much. That's the hypocrisy. The people who despise Trump are now looking for their own Trump, meaning a punk rock outsider who rejects the establishment and wins. Why? Perhaps we figured out that the worst thing about politics are politicians. And if we learned anything from 2016, it's that nothing will ever be the same. Right. You can't go home again. And if you're a Democrat, that includes retirement homes. So, yep, they need a new face, especially one that knows the issues. My choice?
We need to occupy every airport. We need to occupy every border. We need to occupy every ICE office until those kids are back with their parents. Capitalism has not always existed in the world, and it will not always exist in the world.
You use the term the occupation of Palestine. What did you mean by that?
I think what I meant is like the settlements. I am not the expert on geopolitics on this issue.
Trust me, Democrats, pick her. You will win in a landslide.
They might.
Dana, you agree with me?
Well, I think that when the Democrats, every election is about new, but this is why we had hope and change.
Yes.
Right? And the Democrats did go with something new in 2008. They rejected Hillary Clinton and they nominated Barack Obama to be their candidate, and he was able to win. And then the Republicans go the other way. They're like, okay, well, we're going to go with Trump. So now the Democrats are going to have probably 15 to 17 people on stage fighting it out over the next. I mean, it's not far away. The midterm election is November 6th. The 2020 general election starts November 7th.
Right.
So you really are going to start seeing a lot more of this. I don't think that necessarily she would win this time around, but the left is becoming more progressive. They want somebody new and different, somebody who's willing to fight, even if it's futile, right? For example, on the Supreme Court nomination of Dan Pfeiffer, who was the former communications director for Obama, he's out on his book tour now, and he says, even though we know we're probably going to lose, it's worth fighting.
Yeah.
Fighting to the death. Like, well, you might just fight to the death.
Yeah, it's like when you're arguing with a spouse.
Right, to stop.
Yeah, Juan, welcome back. You did a great job at the All-Star game. I think I have to defend Alexandria. Most people don't know how to explain the Middle East.
No. And especially if you're 28 and she's a newcomer to the political stage, and forget the geopolitical stage. She's never been on it.
Yeah.
I don't think she's gotten there yet. But I think you're exactly right that people want a new face. And it's not only that they want a new face. It's interesting. I saw in the polls that there's a split between people who voted for Hillary as to whether or not they would even take a Hillary back. Now, I think where the argument you'd get, Greg, is from the Bernie supporters.
Right.
Who see him as Cortez, same thing, more energy. And here's one thing I noticed in the research. Democratic strategists saying we want somebody who will punch Trump in the face, right? So they want someone who plays like Trump, who's bullying, has the kind of
De Niro.
It could be De Niro, right? Yeah, that could be. But I think an actor, a celebrity, right? Somebody who brings name ID to the table, has pockets of their own money, and challenges the party's base. That's sounds like your guy's candidate.
Yes, there you go. All right, Jesse, I like the idea of a rematch. The reason why, I don't think Hillary wants to be forever known as the person who lost to Trump. That's going to be the first line in the obituary. Not that she was Secretary of State, but that she lost to Trump.
Twice?
What?
But if she lost again, that she lost twice.
That would be a great...
Two-time loser.
It hurts worse than the first time.
That's right.
I don't think that's a good idea.
I have listened to a lot of kind of mediocre and preposterous monologues, but I think that might have been one of your best monologues in a long time. That was very good. Almost as if I wrote it myself. Just kidding. No, I think the Democrats need to nominate a fresh face, and I'm going to be contributing to the campaign coffers of this little socialist Cortez, whatever her name is. But the Democrats are right. When they poll this, they want a fresh face. They win with fresh faces. They win with Bill Clinton, they win with Barack Obama, and they lose with Gore and Kerry and Hillary. So, like you said, they want someone that's going to punch Trump square in the face. And they don't want to do this Michelle Obama thing where, you know, Trump goes low, we go high. They're ready to get in the mud, but there's problems with that. The only person I can see really going toe-to-toe with him verbally is Biden. And I would not call Biden a fresh face. Also, when you get in the mud with Donald Trump, you never really get out. He's a brawler, and he wins ugly.
Look what he did to Rubio.
Exactly. That was ugly. Yeah. And also, it doesn't set up a contrast, a mini Trump. And I think you win when you set up a nice contrast, but they're having a civil war. And the energy and the idealism is on the far left, and the money and the practicality is more towards the center. And we're going to watch this thing, and it's going to be great to watch, but the media is going to cover up all this internal friction, and that's going to be to the detriment of the Democratic Party. It's better to have all these fights out in the open.
Well, it's interesting, too, because to Dana's point, Democrats used to be really good at sort of stifling primaries and clearing them out, and now they're not as much because you have this progressive wing of the party that is super charged up. We've seen that come into fruition. This primary primary time where we hadn't really seen that before. But I think the bigger problem for Democrats is President Obama had really focused on identity politics for 8 years, and with that, you saw a narrowing of the Democratic Party, and Republicans were able to take advantage of that during the midterm elections, and President Trump was as well, of being able to pick up these Democrat strongholds that hadn't gone for Republicans in quite some time. So I think this push to the left, focusing on things like abolishing ICE, only further narrows the party, which hurts them and is a negative impact heading into 2020.
Well, you know, that's the point. It actually, Juan, is like, and I mean, we talked about this, about how Trump wasn't an ideologue. He was some of these stances he had were liberal. Some of them were definitely not Republican. What if, should the Dems be focusing on somebody who is not an ideological Democrat?
I don't know how we would define an ideological Democrat on the left. I mean, I'm not sure.
A communist.
A communist. I think that's the way you guys
socialist.
Don't ask a Republican to help you. A Republican will not help you.
I was foolish. I was a foolish man to ask that question. You know what I think, though, is interesting? I think the counter to Trump may be a woman.
Who do you want to see?
And a young woman, not unlike that
Rosie O'Donnell.
No. Like, I think a young, energetic woman who is unapologetic and saying, you know what? Yep, I think we should have health care in this country. Yep, I think that we should raise the minimum wage. Yeah, I think that we should have no more student debt for people who are trying to get an education.
Who is this lady,
That's
though?
pretty strong. Well, she's one of them, but I think she's too inexperienced. As you can see.
How old is she? Don't you have to be 35?
Yeah.
28, right?
Yeah, you got
To run for president, yes.
Right.
Yeah. That eliminates me, too. You know, this contrast thing, large number of Republican candidates that looked alike made Trump stand out. We've talked about that. So I think you're going to end up with a Democrat that stands out.
Right, because a lot of the 15 possible Democrats, a lot of them are senators.
Right.
Okay, and it's hard to run from the Senate, especially, well, Obama did it, but I think McCain and Hillary Clinton showed that it's just really hard. Yeah. Kerry as well. Yeah, I have a surprise that his name hasn't surfaced a little bit more. He has a book coming out September 24th, so you might want to add
Dana's
John
Kerry
to.
You planted the seed with Al Franken, and look what happened with that.
Yeah. Who else do you want me to add? The other thing is, though, that what's interesting is President Trump will have a record to run on. And he will be a known entity to Republicans. He's got right now a 90% approval rating amongst Republicans. So he's running solo, and he has a record to run on and a good economy. Then you have this massive primary where really only 20% of the country is saying, okay, we are really far left, 20% are saying they're really far right. Now you see in surveys, 60% of Americans are saying, I'm independent. So what happens if in the primary you go so far left? To me, that gives President Trump a pretty good opening to walk right back in.
And also,
here's where I just think the Democrats faced their hardest challenge. When the Tea Party was ignited, it was based off of policy. It was based off of bailouts and Obamacare and spending. And they had these great rallies where they cleaned up after themselves.
Yes, they
and they had speakers, and then they translated that into winning back the House. And they did all right in the Senate. They kind of cut their nose off despite their face a few times. But it translated into electoral success. The Democrats' energy, I wouldn't call it at the level of a Tea Party. I mean, right now they have small rallies. There's no great speaker. And their basic message is, I hate Trump. It's not really around a policy, and the policy that it is around is either abolish ICE or we want socialism. And their tactics have backfired, chasing people out of restaurants, yelling horrible things at people. I just don't know if they're ready for prime time in terms of fielding good candidates to take back the House.
Well, and it's also when you have a crowded primary field, you can see a lot of these people that are being discussed, like a Kamala Harris, a Cory Booker, they all kind of occupy the same space. You could inevitably see someone come down the middle like Trump did, President Trump did, that nobody saw coming.
Peter Strzok.
Yeah. But I think the one thing that's not in the equation as you've drawn it is the tremendous energy on the left because of Trump. And I think that now extends to the middle. And you see that in the polls, Jesse. The intensity on the left going into the midterms far exceeds what you're seeing on the right, even with something like Kavanaugh. And certainly when it comes to taxes, I don't know what the Republican message is other than we don't like immigrants.
Jobs, economy,
wow, that's a
winning.
cheap shot.
Oh, the truth can be cheap.
And I said it's 838 days away. It's actually about, 20, where are we now? 2019 is where it's going to start.
It's kind of scary that it's so soon.
No, it starts 2018.
You know what? It starts right now.
Yes, exactly. All right. Democrats and the media double down on their extreme reaction to President Trump's summit meeting with Vladimir Putin. Are they playing directly into Russia's hands?
Anti-Trump critics are unveiling a new conspiratorial line of attack against the president. But is this playing into Russia's hands? You decide.
Trump's eagerness to sell out America proves the Russians must have something, personally, politically, or financially, on President Trump.
Millions of Americans are left wondering if Putin indeed has something over the president.
The way he behaves, there is a clear signal that the Russians have something on him.
My question is, what does Putin have on Trump?
Meanwhile, President Trump is defending his record on Russia while facing new questions about election meddling from the media.
Is Russia still targeting the U.S., Mr. President?
Thank you very much. And we're doing very well, probably as well as anybody has ever done with Russia. And there's been no president ever as tough as I have been on Russia. All you have to do is look at the numbers, look at what we've done, look at sanctions, look at ambassadors not there, look, unfortunately, at what happened in Syria recently. And I think President Putin knows that better than anybody, certainly a lot better than the media. He understands it, and he's not happy about it.
So the White House is saying President Trump responded no to answering reporters' questions, not in regards to Russian attempts to interfere in the midterm elections. All right, Juan, you haven't been here for the last 2 days, thank goodness. But I know you've been chomping at the bit here to talk about all this Helsinki chaos. Why don't you go ahead?
Well, no, I think the first thing we should talk about, Jesse, is this idea that he's compromised, that they have something on it, because this is all over now. I mean, when you hear Leon Panetta, and I think Leon Panetta is widely respected across the political divide in our polarized country, say, hey, you know, his behavior is mighty peculiar, and it's not explained except by the idea that somehow somebody has some leverage over him, whether it's the notorious tape or money or finances. So today I noticed a lot of pickup on the idea that Congress could say, hey, let us see your tax returns, Mr. President. Let's just get this out of the way so we know that you're not somehow financially, in debt the Russians.
Juan says, Dana, that it has to be something that the Russians have on Trump to explain his behavior. Couldn't you also say, you know, Trump's not living in a Cold War world anymore, and he honestly thinks his outreach to the Russians is just going to make the world a better and safer place?
You can say a lot of things. I do wonder if the Democrats have somehow some poll-tested information, because you can see when, like, the bat signal goes out and they all use the same language.
Yeah.
I mean, Republicans do that too, but in this case,
but they're better at it.
They were really focused just last week when Brett Kavanaugh was nominated to the Supreme Court a week ago today.
What did they say?
It was all about health care.
Oh.
Remember, we talked about, the Democrats are zeroing in on a message. They're going to run on health care going into the midterms. And it changes all of a sudden. And I wonder if some sort of overnight polling had come in and said, you know what really energizes the base? It's not health care.
You're right.
It's Russia. So we're just going to focus on this writ large. I do think that the question being, isn't this what Russia wants? Meaning all the chaos within here. I think, what Russia really wants is, Putin wants to reconstitute the USSR. He wants power, prestige. He wants to be seen as a big global leader. He was doing poorly in his country because of the economic conditions. When he invaded Crimea, his poll numbers went way up. Well, that's started to go down because one of the things they have a huge problem with is their economy. Putin has suggested raising the retirement age. He went from a 68% approval rating in March to down to 49% now. And that doesn't have to do with President Putin. That's domestic politics. And every leader takes their own domestic politics to the world stage. And President Trump did too.
What do you think about that? Do you think this, traitor talk, and they have something on him talk, is playing into Russia's hands?
I do love the traitor talk, because only on CNN is Trump a hardcore nationalist who would then betray his country. I mean, there's so many contradictions in this, that he's an appeaser to Putin, yet he's trying to take the pipeline away from him. It's amazing to me. I have an alternative explanation. I look at Trump's behavior as somebody who didn't see what he did wrong, and it is so obvious. His reaction to the reaction was like, what did I do? This is just what I do. I've been talking about this for 2 years, about working with people, working with Russia. It might make a better world if, for prosperity and peace, if you work with these people. And in his head, it is a business transaction. What he's doing is I got to build this casino in Atlantic City. I got to go talk to Sammy the Bull so I can make sure everything goes well. He sees Putin as just a little player that you grease, so you can get the things that you need. The problem is this little player, Putin, happens to be involved in a lot of things.
Yeah,
whether it's
interference, right?
Yeah, interference.
Yeah.
Interference, Middle East, Iran, North Korea. He can help in all of those things. So what he's doing is, okay, I'm going to give Putin a little bit of stature, a little bit of status. In return, he might be able to help us with all of those things. That's a transaction, and that's why he doesn't see it as anything wrong. And frankly, neither do I.
So he's a businessman, and he's not steeped in this kind of Cold War mentality where everybody in Washington understands we've been fighting the Russians for decade after decade, and we can't ever be nice to them. And Trump comes in with the slap on the back and the handshake and just blows the whole system up.
Well, the irony is that President Trump's policies have been tougher than President Obama. So it's sort of ironic that we're at this point and we're having these discussions. But I think a lot of people want to look at Russia for sowing the division in the country, but we're the ones doing that as a country. And we've seen so much divisions and so much divisiveness over the last few years. And we as Americans are responsible for that. So I think we should probably look at ourselves and want to change that. And also,
can I just say one thing about the Democrats, though? I mean, they do feel slighted by Russia for the interference in the election, and they see that the president isn't standing up for election integrity writ large. That is part of the division. That's not that, like, they don't have a responsibility to say, okay, right, okay, no problem.
Okay, but
get over it. They didn't cause Hillary to lose. Hillary lost.
They did. Here's the thing.
Go
ahead. I'm going to give you a shot. Go ahead.
I'd like to finish my point. But alternatively, you also look at something like Democrats pushing for faithless electors. I think that does a lot more to hurt the electoral process and for people to lose faith in elections. Because what is the point in voting if we're going to have faithless electors? And Democrats were pushing for that. And quite frankly, that does a lot more to hurt the process than $2,000 spent on social media ads.
Let me ask you a question. Okay. Do you really think some embarrassing emails about Hillary and Bubba and Chelsea's wedding swung the election away from Hillary Clinton?
I think
you really do think that
the last 10 days, the Comey stuff with the wiener emails. I think.
Well, Hillary is responsible for that. She's the one that set up the server.
No, she did not. Comey's the one who decided to bring. But let me just say, the news of today is, to me, because I love my colleagues on the Five, when Trump says that people of higher end intellect understand what he's up to. So that's why I came back to the show, because I figured I'd be surrounded by people. But I must say, how can you guys not? You're focusing on, the Democrat. This guy is saying, no, Russians aren't interfering, contradicting our own intelligence, our own Senate. I mean, it's like he's not on our team. He's working for the other team. How can you ignore this?
Well, we're not ignoring it. We're talking about it. And at least he didn't bow to the Saudi king.
Oh, get out of here.
Our designer baby's coming to America. The controversy up next.
Memories can live on, but the good old days are good and gone. Even when you feel like you're still hanging off my shoulder, here's a perfect mess. Good luck getting
A major moral and scientific debate is heating up after a landmark decision in the UK where the leading ethics council there has given the go-ahead to genetically modify babies. In other words, parents could predetermine the DNA, including physical attributes of their future children in the lab. The Guardian reporting, quote, the UK-based Nuffield Council on Bioethics says changing the DNA of a human embryo could be morally permissible if it is in the child's best interest. Critics worry the technology could be misused to create a genetic elite. Greg, this is not a new topic. It might be new that the UK is making a formal decision, but this has been going on for quite a while.
Right.
And it's, as far as I can see so far, it's mostly to try to prevent illnesses and disease.
Yeah, critics of new technology are almost always wrong.
Right.
They always go, oh my God, something bad's going to happen, and they do science no favors. If you have a chance to eliminate or reduce the certainty of certain lifelong medical disorders among children, genetic modification could prevent that problem. These are gene therapies. And by the way, when a pregnant woman goes on supplements or quits smoking or reduces alcohol, she's designing a baby too. When you read to your child, when you introduce discipline and certain kind of moral precepts, you're designing a child. If anything, we need more design than ever.
I've
seen these
kids. That could be a controversial way to look at it. Jesse, what do you think?
Listen, I think in 100 years, everyone that has money is going to have a designer baby to a certain extent.
It's going to be little Jesse Waters.
Well, yeah, right. Perfection. Embodied. And, they're going to say, they tinker with the genome, a little taller, a little better looking, a little smarter, funnier. And that's how it's going to be, because everybody wants to play God. All humans want to play God, especially if you're rich. You want to play God. I don't know if I would do it. I like to roll the dice, but I mean, if you can get a lock and you can afford a lock, I don't see why people wouldn't do it. I don't know if America is ready for it, though.
But the problem is they're not God. And I come from this from a personal approach in the sense that I have an aunt who has special needs and a little brother with Asperger's. And these are the types of people that folks would try to avoid having. So I look at this from a very personal lens, and the sense that my aunt is the wisest person I've ever met. My little brother is the most warm-hearted, one of the smartest people I've ever met. And I can't imagine a life or a world without them. And quite frankly, I think we have more to learn from individuals with special needs in this country than they have from us. So I fully oppose this. And I look at it very similar to what countries like Iceland are doing with aborting babies with Down syndrome and trying to essentially eliminate kids with Down syndrome. And I find it disgusting. And I look at this from a purely political or a purely personal standpoint.
How do you feel about cochlear implants, which allow the deaf to hear?
But I think what you're looking at with this is who gets to make the kind of decisions about what sort of genes and defects, quote unquote defects, that we're making.
I think the parents. Well, for instance, theoretically, if you see that the child has some sort of abnormality, and you can go into a lab with a doctor and say, maybe if I can tweak a gene and then the child does not have that abnormality, the parents are getting an opportunity to make that decision.
But
is that what this is about?
Right, that's if, for example, in the case that we're discussing, the one that the British approved, it had to do with a heart problem, right?
Right.
And that was specific.
Right.
Now, what they say is that most of the things, like if you say, oh, I want to be more like Jesse Waters, I want to be more athletic.
No one wants
They
that.
don't.
Even Jesse.
I'll let Mrs. Waters
That's
respond.
why Jesse supports this.
Yeah. But they don't know how to quite do that yet.
Yeah.
And now this technology invented in the U.S., but guess who is specializing and pushing it? The Chinese.
Yes.
And they have, they used to have the one-child policy and the like. This does not bode well. So what you get is, to me, and speaking as an American, is a worry about inequities, because it seems to me, just like, you know, the children of the rich have a higher chance of getting into Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, guess what? The children of the rich are the ones who would benefit from genetic engineering of some type. They become like a super race of people.
But also, Greg, also often when there is a new technology, the ethical concerns and the legislation or the regulation always lags. And so isn't it too late to have this discussion?
I think it is. And I do think it, going back to the case that Juan brings up, I think it is about stuff like that. I think it's not about making Jesse Waters a better Jesse Waters, if that's possible. But the reason why I bring up the cochlear implants is there is a movement of people who believe that you're eliminating deaf culture, so that actual cochlear implants, which allow you to hear, is actually a bad thing. And it's like, well, who's to judge that?
Right.
If a parent wants their child to hear for the first time and there are activists saying no, well, what?
No, the parents should get to decide.
Yeah, I think that's where you end up. But I don't think it's about, like, you know, and actually it might actually allow, it might reduce abortions because you're you know,
able to fix an abnormality.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Anyway, it's a very interesting discussion, and it's certainly not over. Neither are we. Up next, a great political debate. Who's happier, liberals or conservatives? The answer straight ahead.
We keep hearing the term Trump derangement syndrome. It's thrown around. But is it real? Are liberals really that unhappy with the president? Well, we don't have an answer on that one, folks. But new research does show that conservatives are overall happier, more satisfied, and find greater meaning in life than liberals. What do you make of this, Dana?
That it's not new. This is these studies are consistent over time, and I don't know. You know, I grew up in a pretty conservative world in Wyoming and Colorado. Well, when Colorado was red. So I think it just might be an outlook on life, and possibly, and I don't know if this is true anymore, but attending religious services or having faith, I do think that adds to happiness. But also, conservatives are pretty happy with the country. They like the Constitution. They don't think it should be changed. So liberals tend to really want to change all of those things. Like, we're talking about a living Constitution. Like, no, conservatives are quite happy with what we have. And so I think that probably leads to it. But I'm not exactly sure. Maybe because conservatives might have more dogs.
More dogs.
More
Lisa,
dogs.
but let me pick up on what Dana was saying, because what the research shows is if you have more money, if you are more likely to be married and have kids, then you're happier.
Well, I have none of those things. And I'm pretty happy. I mean, I think Dana, you'd made really good points, and I think the religion part of it, one aspect, because if you think that life is about something bigger than you, then you're going to be more outwardly focused as opposed to inward. And then two, I think Republicans are very self-reliant in the sense of we believe that we create our own success. We don't look to the government. We don't look, for outside resources to get ahead. And so I think when you have that sort of mentality of, if I want something, if I want to do better in life, I'm going to accomplish it on my own, that would bring a better sense of fulfillment and satisfaction and happiness.
What, Greg? I got to shock you.
What?
It says here that the happiest Americans are either extremely conservative, that's 48%, or extremely liberal, that's 35%.
Well, that's interesting, because I was going to say that people who aren't happy are often those who make politics personal. They identify themselves so much with politics. You will never be happy. You have to treat it. But happiness is really weird, because it's really about long-term satisfaction. And they do these studies, and they find that people are satisfied relative to others. Meaning, like, if you could be happy at 5'8", but if all of you were 5'10", I would be unhappy. So it's status relative. And that's why maybe conservatives might be happier, is that religion helps mitigate the envy and the dissatisfaction that happens with status inequality. If you don't believe in God, and I won't say where I am at this because then I'll get letters, but status inequality is unexplained. Like, if you're in a godless society and you can't explain why on Instagram everybody's having a better time than you, and you don't have a community and you don't have friends that you can talk to or a higher power, all you have is envy, and I think that's a very destructive
Didn't
thing.
you just do a podcast about this?
I did. Thank you for plugging that.
Remind me of the guy who wrote it, The Happiness Project.
Oh, Jonathan Rauch.
Okay.
Good
I
job.
think Greg makes a good point. I mean, when I go on Instagram, I get insecure because everyone's tan and looks great with their shirt off.
True.
So I don't go on there anymore. But here are my theories about why this is the truth.
Was that boys or girls?
Both. Here's what I think. I think liberals see the world through the prism of victimhood and suffering. And so they see all these wrongs that need to be corrected, and it's exhausting, and it's incredibly draining. I also don't think they're as patriotic. So they live in a country that was, we overran the Indians, and then it was built by slaves, and now greedy corporations are running the show, and that drives them crazy. And then also, and I think studies prove this.
Wait,
liberals,
and you could be content with this?
I'm saying that's how they see things.
Oh, okay.
I don't see the history of the United States like that. And then also, and studies will prove that conservatives are better looking and more financially successful. So that makes liberals, I think, socially feel a little awkward.
Really?
Juan, are you happy?
That whole Hollywood crowd, you mean those liberals that are
not
so
happy.
good looking? They're
No.
not.
Yeah, but can I add something?
Miserable.
Can I
Okay.
disagree with what you
They're
said?
dead inside.
Can I disagree with one of the points you said?
Yeah, go ahead.
Studies show that children do not increase satisfaction. That's a fact.
Well,
it's like because they're actually harder on your life, and people say, oh, children will make your life better.
Well, but it says here,
I saw an opposite
it says
study.
here, 52% of married
Now I'm gonna get
religious
letters.
people with kids. Very
I have
happy.
a niece, and she makes me very
Okay,
happy.
but I will say
Because
that
she's your niece, not your kid. If you were your kid, you'd be miserable.
I'll report back in a few years.
I got to tell you, grandkids are like this too.
All right, well, we're
but
nowhere
I would
near
say
that.
very quickly that when I tell people what I think are the keys to happiness, 1, get as much education you have. 2, get married before you have kids. And 3, keep a job until you can
Well, you
develop
sound like a
resume.
conservative.
There you go. I don't think that's very conservative. I think that's rational. Find out who
Same
on
thing.
the 5, yes, among this 5 brotherhood and sisterhood would be brave enough to blast off into outer space. You got to stay right here to find out who it is.
Welcome back. So have you ever dreamed of taking a trip to space? Well, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos has your ticket to the stars for an out-of-this-world price. For reported $200,000 per person, a ride aboard his Blue Origin space rocket will give adventurous passengers the chance to experience zero gravity. Putting cost aside, who here on the 5 would be willing to go? So Greg, I feel like you would do this.
Oh, absolutely not. I have no interest.
There's no way.
No way in hell. I have problems in elevators, and I don't trust Bezos. He just
like robots
he just
and
puts you in a box. Robots aren't space. I'm more interested in inner space. What's going on at the subatomic level, like quantum physics, in the relationship to time and space and your consciousness. There's like a lot of speculation on that. Our consciousness, how we view the world, is based on the subparticles around us. That's more interesting.
That is interesting.
It is like the fact that if it weren't for these subparticles, we wouldn't even.
This is not your podcast, gotta help. This is what happens on your podcast.
It's a podcast. It's more like a podcast.
But this is also like a real thing. Like there's a couple different groups. You've got Richard Branson. You've
I'm
got
going to tell you,
SpaceX. They're trying to
I
corner
would
this
say,
market.
obviously, I could not afford something like that. Also, I would never go because I don't really
Please.
have any interest in space.
That's chump change
But
for you.
I will say that the elite in this country and in Europe and increasingly so in Asia, they'll spend $160,000 on a private flight to go overseas.
Yeah.
So $200,000 per person. I bet there's a lot of people take them up on that.
Well, and I think for Virgin, or for Jeff Bezos, what is it, Virgin Galactic, they already have people that have signed up. Jesse, you on board with this?
On board, nice one. Yeah, I would go. I don't think people would want me to come back, though. I think they'd like me to stay up there.
You'd be a one-shot wonder.
Yeah, don't get them the round trip. Just get them the one way.
Maybe it'd be a discounted price.
That's right. That's right. No, I'd try anything.
So I gotta find a way to get $800,000 by next year.
You could
because
do a GoFundMe
I can think
page.
of 4 space cadets that I would love to see go into.
Good one, Juan.
But I must say, so
Very mean to say that about The View.
You got it. I was thinking, oh, you mean you actually go into outer space, but actually you don't. You just go a couple miles. I think it's like 60 miles
So
up.
that makes it less scary.
And then you get to see the curvature of the Earth. But the scary part, Lisa, was then they drop you with a parachute. You don't land, you splash.
Oh, no thanks.
But Dana,
Wait, you splash into the ocean?
Yeah, well, they got a parachute on you. I think that's what happens.
But Dana, so the big problem here is there's polling on this, and like 58% of Americans are like, this is too scary, I don't want to do this. I mean, how do they change those numbers?
I think partly it's just, as Greg was saying earlier, that people look at new technologies and they're usually wrong initially. You think, well, I'll never do that. And that was true of bicycles and vehicles, like actual cars. And now we have, driverless cars. We're starting to get a little bit more comfortable with that idea.
People were afraid of bicycles?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
They called him the two-wheeled murderer.
I don't know. I fell off one when I first tried riding a bike, and
But you got back up on it.
They thought that people were going to get hurt, that it was going to cause problems. Yeah, like everything that's new takes a while to get used to.
The pencil sharpener. People were scared to death of it. People were using it incorrectly.
Wait, the electric pencil
sharpener? Yes.
Wait, so real quick, so we've got a no.
Yes.
Jesse, yes, one.
I'm sending you guys.
Oh, yeah, great. All right.
I'll borrow your tinfoil hat.
I think I'm too much of a chicken for this. Maybe
I'll watch the video.
Yeah, I'll cheer other people on. All right, well, stay tuned because one more thing is coming up next, and you're not going to want to miss it.
All right, one more thing.
Well, I'm just back from the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. I want to tell you, take a look at my new personal baseball cards. Yes, that's me right there with Sean Doolittle of the Nationals, and here I am with JT Realmuto of Miami, their all-star catcher. But the big personal drama came when I was on the field. Take a look behind me, if you will. You see those dark clouds? I just made it to the Nationals dugout before the rains came. But then came the deluge. It was an epic rain for an hour of hard rain, and as you can see, it flooded the dugout and stranded our TV crew in there. We couldn't get out. But then the sun came out, and the All-Stars put on their own thunder and lightning show, 8 home runs. What a great time.
Nice.
Excellent.
All right. Package tomorrow, Greg. I'm going to have a whole package on this.
Excellent. We shall look forward to it. Dana?
We will. All right, so I have a podcast too. It's called I'll Tell You What. I do it with Chris Starwalt, and there's a new one up today, so you can listen to that. And his 2 young boys have asked a favor of the 5. So I said that, okay, we will give it a shot. They recently watched A Field of Dreams, and they loved the movie. They love baseball. They went to the Home Run Derby, and they say that this mystery of who the voice is that says this. Listen.
If you build it, he will come.
So apparently there's a big mystery as to who that voice actually is. For a long time, Ray Liotta was the leading contender among fans, but in 2014, W.P. Kinsella, he was the author, suggested Ed Harris, but admitted that was just based on rumor. So the boys want to know who actually is the voice that says, if you build it, they will come.
It's Blue Dobbs. Creepy voice.
Oh, okay. Well, that's mystery solved. Blue Dobbs.
It's
Okay.
Blue Dobbs.
But if you really know, tweet me or whatever. We'll figure it out.
All right, I also have a podcast. It's with Daniela Greenbaum. She was involved in a big controversy in which she was forced to resign. No, not forced to resign. She resigned from her columnist spot at Business Insider. You're going to want to find out why she resigned. It's very interesting. Now it's time for this. Greg's Cable News. Well, man, I decided to get up really early and watch a show called Morning Joe. And this is me. I often film myself while watching other shows. And I was just, it's a very slow moving show. And I was just trying to stay awake because Mika just prattles on and Joe just sits there looking like Joe. And I just kept passing. Oh, I was up again. They have an interview with somebody. And then I was like almost there. Oh, no, there she goes again. And then I'm just out, almost out. And then,
Do these people ever respond to you or do they just ignore you?
They ignore me.
They ignore probably wise.
All
right, it's you, Jesse.
All right, I don't have a podcast, but I have this. There is a new Guinness Book of World Records, which has been shattered by this guy. He slices watermelons on his stomach with a machete, and he crushed it. He sliced 26.
Oh, my God.
And
why would you do that?
There wasn't even a Guinness Book of World Records for this. He suggested it to Guinness, and they said, sure, why not? And he has now the record.
This is so dumb.
Do
you think this is some kind of turn on?
No.
No, it's like I'm going to turn it into a world record thing, but it's actually a fetish.
You think he likes that?
Yes.
In a sexual way?
Exactly.
I'm not so sure, Greg.
All right.
Another topic for your podcast.
All All right, moving on. All right, well,
Save us.
Full disclosure, I'm a senior fellow for the Independent Woman's Voice, so they do pay me, but I am doing this on my own volition. So they're launching Champion Woman. So far too often, you often see voices on the right get shut down. There's a lot of name calling. You see that with people like Sarah Huckabee Sanders. So they are launching Champion Woman, where they're encouraging people across different ideologies and partisanship to respect each other, to not criticize each other in that way, to promote each other's success, and to cheer each other on. So it's a good thing. www.championwoman.com.
I'm against that.
You just hate all women?
I want to be on record to be against something everybody's for.
Wait a
I
second.
think it doesn't happen every day.
Yeah,
That's true. I can testify.
That is
But,
true.
Can I join, or is it only women?
I can't answer that. So you'll have to
Juan wants to join because it's just women.
That could be.
Oh my goodness, terrible.
And I respect your disclosure of your financial status. That was very respectable.
Thank you, Jesse. It means a lot coming from you. Jesse.
Terrible man. He's a terrible, terrible man. All right, we got to move on. Never miss an episode of The Five. If you want news with great hair, here's our guy, Brett Baer. Where is Brett? There he is.
I don't have a podcast either. Thanks, Greg. President Trump tells an interviewer